Sydney Sweeney's new movie had one of the worst box office debuts in film history. Christy, which follows the life of trailblazing professional boxer Christy Martin, debuted to just 1.3 million after its November 7th release, ranking number 12 among the worst wide openings in history for films shown in more than 2,000 theaters. The movie's numbers takes a sharp turn for Sweeney's production company, 50/50 Films, as its second project after the rom-com hit Anyone But You.
Before we get into this, take a second to subscribe to my channel for more celebrity stories and pop culture breakdowns. Do you realize how uncomfortable something has to be for Nathan Fielder to parody it within 24 hours? Because that's the level we're dealing with here, and it immediately raised eyebrows. I've talked about Sydney Sweeney on this channel before, and if you're new, I've been pretty open about my issues with season 2 of Euphoria and the direction it took. A lot of that criticism centered on how her character was written and used to drive almost all of the drama. Sydney plays Cassie, who started as a supporting character in season 1, then suddenly became the emotional core of season 2. Nearly every major storyline depended on her choices, her reactions, and her downward spiral. The material she was given leaned heavily into extreme emotional moments and heightened fantasy. Cassie was constantly on the edge, either breaking down or humiliating herself.
You better be joking. Are you okay, Kat?
No! Yes! I am in love with Nate Jacobs and he is in love with me! But you two were broken up for 3 weeks and 3 days before we even had sex, so I didn't betray you! Plus, you guys are terrible for each other and you know I'm right and you guys can all judge me if you want, but I do not care! I have never, ever been happier!
And Sydney committed fully to those scenes. As a result, many of those moments became some of the most talked about parts of the season. So even though the writing itself was questionable, her performance still stood out. Sydney showed she could handle intense, emotionally charged roles, almost like a psychological drama lead. Even if that wasn't exactly what the show set out to be, a lot of people watched that performance and immediately had the same reaction. They were saying she had serious final girl energy, like she belonged in a horror movie, and honestly, I get it. Beyond just being conventionally attractive, Sydney has a very distinct presence on screen. When you look at how intense and emotionally raw she can get, it's easy to imagine her in something darker and more suspense-driven. A project with someone like Ari Aster, or even a season of American Horror Story would actually make sense for her range. When season 2 of Euphoria ended, people had a lot of mixed feelings about the show itself, but one thing was clear: Sydney Sweeney was becoming a rising star. She turned into an it girl almost overnight, and it felt obvious that she was about to be everywhere. The issue that started popping up after that was casting. Even though she kept booking project after project, a lot of those roles felt off. Not bad performances, but choices that didn't fully match her strengths. Over time, that disconnect started to shift public opinion a little. There was also a brief moment of online controversy that added noise to the conversation, but the bigger problem came from what people were seeing in trailers and promo material. The reactions weren't great. Before getting into that though, it's worth mentioning a couple of her post-Euphoria performances that actually worked. One of them was her ensemble role in season 1 of The White Lotus, which is a separate discussion on its own. Both seasons of The White Lotus have now been widely watched and discussed, though reactions to the show have varied. While many viewers connected with its slow burn style, others felt it worked better as a weekly release rather than a binge experience, which may explain the mixed responses. In the series, Sydney Sweeney plays a character who appears immature and shallow at first, traveling with her family on vacation. However, her performance adds a subtle edge that keeps the character from feeling flat. Much of her dialogue is delivered with dry humor, and like many performances in the show, her approach is restrained and understated. There are no explosive emotional moments like those seen in Euphoria. Instead, she relies on controlled expressions and quiet timing, which suited the role well and showed a different side of her acting range. Another notable performance came later in an HBO film centered on Reality Winner. The film received less attention due to its direct-to-streaming release, but the subject matter itself is serious. Reality Winner was arrested in 2017 for leaking classified information related to Russian interference in the 2016 US presidential election. The movie focuses primarily on her interrogation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, creating a tense, contained narrative. Sydney Sweeney approached the role with care, noting in interviews that it was the first time she portrayed a real person. She prepared extensively and even spoke with reality winner beforehand, who expressed confidence in her ability to tell the story accurately. While the film isn't a psychological thriller, it functions as a biographical drama that depends heavily on subtle emotional shifts. The role required sustained intensity, layered expression, and the ability to communicate pressure and fear without overt dramatics, skills that aligned closely with Sydney's strengths as a performer. Unfortunately, that HBO performance did end up getting turned into a meme for a lot of people. A still image of Sydney Sweeney was taken out of context, and without knowing the real story behind Reality Winner, the image landed more as unintentionally funny than serious. The moment spread quickly online, even though it didn't really reflect the weight of the role itself. That aside, what's clear from her recent work is that Sydney has a skill set many actors aim for. She can fully lean into heightened emotion like she did with Cassie on Euphoria, delivering intense, chaotic energy when the role calls for it. At the same time, she's shown she can pull things back and offer a quieter, more layered performance when the material demands restraint. However, as more promotional material has surfaced for her upcoming projects, some concerns have started to grow. One of the biggest examples is the romantic comedy Anyone But You. From what's been shown so far, it's becoming clearer that comedy may not be her strongest lane. When the official trailer dropped, it answered a few questions but also reinforced earlier confusion. Before that, audiences mainly knew the setup involved two conventionally attractive characters who dislike each other, pretend to be a couple, and inevitably fall in love. The trailer does explain the inciting incident, but the execution feels more like exaggerated fan fiction logic rather than a grounded or clever twist. Part of the issue is timing. This specific romantic comedy formula dominated screens 10 to 15 years ago. Back then, studios regularly released films built around the same enemies to lovers blueprint. While there are solid examples of the genre, this particular project appears to lean heavily on familiar tropes without offering much that feels new or self-aware. As a result, the concern isn't about Sydney's talent overall, but whether she's being placed in roles that truly play to her strengths. The full trailer can't be shown due to copyright restrictions and ad suitability concerns, especially since much of it relies heavily on suggestive visuals. That alone has already limited how the project can be discussed in certain spaces. However, viewers who watched the trailer for Anyone But You noticed something that sparked immediate conversation. Sydney Sweeney appears noticeably stiff and uncomfortable throughout many of the scenes. Her co-star Glenn Powell isn't delivering anything groundbreaking either, but he at least leans fully into a familiar, charm-based persona. His performance echoes the confident, smirking, romantic lead energy often associated with actors like Ryan Reynolds. Sydney, on the other hand, comes across as out of her element. That disconnect triggered a wave of reactions online, with many people questioning how an actress known for strong, dramatic performances suddenly felt so misaligned on screen. The confusion wasn't rooted in disbelief of her talent, but in how mismatched the role appeared to be. The prevailing takeaway wasn't that Sydney lacks ability. Instead, it raised questions about whether she fits the universal it girl mold that her appearance often places her in. From a casting perspective, image plays a major role, and that label can sometimes push actors into roles that don't align with their strengths. There are examples of actresses who've navigated this carefully. Emma Stone balanced mainstream projects with unconventional, riskier roles that challenged her and expanded her range. Similarly, Mia Goth carved out a distinct lane by choosing films that leaned into psychological and horror-driven material, playing directly to her unique presence. What complicates things further is timing. Sydney faced a double hit of scrutiny this week. Alongside the romantic comedy trailer, the first footage for Madame Web was also released. Together, the back-to-back promotional drops intensified the conversation around her recent career direction and whether the projects she's attached to are truly serving her long-term potential. This situation feels different, mainly because the issue isn't just performance, it's the overall tone of the movie itself. The film appears to struggle in a completely separate way, and unfortunately, that doesn't do Sydney Sweeney any favors. Before the trailer dropped, many people assumed Sydney was the main lead of Madame Web. Instead, the spotlight and the backlash landed squarely on Dakota Johnson. One specific line reading from the promotional footage quickly became a viral meme, setting the tone for how audiences reacted to the entire trailer. That moment alone shaped expectations, and not in a positive way. Sydney appears in the trailer as one of the supporting spider characters, and only briefly. Her character is styled as socially awkward and bookish, clearly an attempt by the wardrobe department to visually separate her from her usual image. However, the execution doesn't fully sell the transformation. The delivery feels stiff, and the performance comes across as restrained in a way that doesn't quite match the genre. While this isn't a straight-up comedy, superhero films, especially those produced by Sony Pictures, often rely on fast-paced dialogue and quippy one-liners. That approach is heavily inspired by the tone popularized by Marvel Studios, and it demands a certain rhythm and ease from its actors. From what's shown so far, Sydney doesn't naturally fit that mold. That doesn't mean she's incapable of surprising audiences. There's still room for the finished film to shift perceptions. However, based on the trailer alone, she doesn't immediately read as a superhero presence, especially in a universe that already struggles with consistency. What adds to the skepticism is the broader track record. Recent Sony superhero releases have failed to gain strong audience trust, making viewers even more critical before the film is released. As a result, this project has become another flashpoint in the ongoing discussion about whether Sydney's recent roles are truly aligned with her strengths, or simply the result of momentum pushing her into mismatched territory. At the end of the day, there's a certain level of sympathy that comes into this conversation. It's not always clear how much control Sydney Sweeney actually has over the roles she takes or the projects she signs onto. If those decisions are being heavily influenced by representation focused purely on visibility and momentum, then that might be part of the problem. There's no denying why she was positioned as Hollywood's next big it girl. From a surface-level industry perspective, it makes sense. She fits the image studios love to push. But talent-wise, her strengths seem to lie elsewhere. The recurring issue isn't her ability, but how often she's being placed in big, accessible projects that don't play to what she actually does best. That mismatch has only become louder with the recent backlash surrounding Immaculate, sometimes casually referred to online as the Christie situation due to confusion around her character and marketing. While the film aimed to position her back in a darker, more serious lane, reactions were still mixed, reigniting debates about whether audiences are being oversaturated or simply unconvinced by how her projects are being framed. Some critics argue her career path would benefit from a shift toward more selective, director-driven work, similar to what Jacob Elordi has been doing with smaller, prestige-focused projects under auteurs like Sofia Coppola. That kind of trajectory prioritizes fit over hype. Looking ahead, it'll also be interesting to see how things shift when Euphoria returns, reportedly in 2026 for what's expected to be its final season. The cast will be coming back with very different industry experiences, reputations, and leverage than when they first started. Whether that changes the creative dynamic behind the scenes remains to be seen. So what do you think? Is Sydney being miscast, or is this just a rough transitional phase? Do you think her recent backlash is fair, or is the internet overcorrecting again? If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.